Good afternoon, everyone. Just wanted to thank you all for joining us on this next edition of NDI Presents. Today we're going through our next brown bag series, Configuration Management. This is going to be with presented by John Coffey. John's on the horn with me now, and I'm going to turn it over to him right away. He's got quite a bit of information to get over to you. If you have any questions, just feel free to type them in the chat window on the right side of the YouTube page that is giving the broadcast. John will pick up those questions and answer them as they come in. Also, we found that there's about a 30 to 45 second lag between you guys being able to see the video and John presenting. So don't be surprised if your question comes out, a minute or two later than when you asked it. That's pretty much it. With that, I'm going to turn it over to John, and we'll go from there.
Yeah.
John?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Welcome, everybody, to the first Brown Bag of 2017. I hope you all had a good holidays and are getting back into the swing of things. Dave, just a clarification, you need to tell me what the questions are if they come in, since I don't have access to the text window at this point.
Okay, no problem.
So today I'm going to talk about configuration management. And the agenda for today is we'll talk about the definition, what is configuration management, and why it's important to NDI and to our development projects. Talk a little bit about the planning for configuration management, and then focus more on software configuration management, which is what we are doing primarily here at NDI, followed by some questions. And I have a couple of resources at the very end of the presentation. What is configuration management? A good source of information is Wikipedia for a lot of things, and they defined configuration management as a systems engineering process for establishing and maintaining consistency of a product's performance, functional and physical attributes with its requirements, design, and operational information throughout its life. So I'm sorry for reading that, but it's important to understand where its role. And further, CM configuration management is the practice of handling changes systematically so that a system maintains its integrity throughout its life. In order to do this, you need to have in place policies and procedures and tools that help you manage the configuration, evaluate proposed changes, which is a big part of it, track the status of changes, and maintain the inventory of the system and support documents as the system changes. So note here, they discuss supporting not only the software itself, the code, but also all the documents that might go with the software release, including the requirements, any kind of user manuals, and things like that. And a successful program is designed in order to help everybody be successful. You'll have improved performance, primarily through being able to rectify any changes that might go wrong, be able to identify quickly if there is a bug, where it's located within the code. Also, the requirement that directs that particular piece of software code functionality. So help you recover much more quickly. They will also help you with system compliance and establish specifications and guidelines, which might be for your CMMI purposes, lowering the probability of errors through the rigorous way that the software is maintained within the repository, which also would lead to enhanced availability online and ultimately happier clients. This next couple of slides deal with the process of planning. How do you implement your CM policies and procedures? So we have a number of activities that go on for it. Planning in the big wheel, starting at the top and going clockwise. Planning your processes, the people, your automation that you may or may not have as part of your solution, and the management of the process. Part of the process is actually developing your CM plan and your CM system, which could be a manual system or it could be supported with automation. And we'll get into that a little bit later on. This next diagram I like a lot, but it's very complicated. But it covers pretty much everything you do within the CM world. And I'm not going to go into this in any detail at all, but it has all the major pieces of configuration management. And again, they tie loosely to the planning aspects on the previous slide. So top left, you have your management and planning activities. Going down to your right, you have your configuration identification, your control processes, your status in accounting, and your verification and your audit. Oops. So you can look at that on your own in more detail. Another question that may come up, who really needs configuration management? And it really applies to all levels within your organization. At the top level, at the corporate level, you might need it for CMMI purposes or for other certifications. There could also be a need for a CM solution just for the organization or for the executives. We've been doing a lot of work back and forth with the government on documents and maintaining versions of our documents, and knowing which one is the correct one is a challenge. And so we have a solution that we're dealing with now, processes and a technology solution that help us to manage that. Project managers need CM for their progress reporting. The configuration management manager, obviously he needs CM, but he needs the procedures and the policies in order to be effective. Developers use the CM tools when they're developing their code, fixing bugs, coming up with new functionality, etc. Tester, as Dave can verify also, that he needs to be able to know which is the current release of software that he needs to be testing, or the current piece of software that he is looking at. QA, the same kind of aspects. And the customer is involved with the CM process because he's going to be evaluating the product and also submitting bugs for being fixed. So getting back to the plan, what is in the CM plan? And there are whole separate lectures you could take just on the CM plan. I do have a good reference that I can provide at the end that talks about what are in a software configuration management plan. So the key things are the processes, policies, and procedures. And to that end, they should answer all the what, how, when, why, where questions you might have. There are going to be links into the software lifecycle itself. It should describe the organization and the interfaces to other organizations that you might be dealing with, other development groups, or it could be a corporate. It's also to keep in mind that if you have subcontractors, they may have separate CM requirements, and you should be cognizant of what those are so that you can help support those as well, in order to be collaborative. The CM plan should address the following kinds of questions. What needs to be under configuration management? So to that end, you need to identify your tasks, your activities, all the documents, things like that need to be underneath configuration control. So you need to identify those. You have to identify any policies and procedures within your plan. And at a corporate level, know what your CMMI requirements are. Other things that you can be looking at are what are the data structures. So it's not just, again, software code or documents. You might need to know you should know what your database schema is, if that's what you have, or what your data structures are. You need to work on and plan what kind of control are you going to have over the over the system? Is it going to be extremely tight where everything is considered under configuration management control, which means that you're going to be checking things out constantly left and right, all the developers? It's a lot of overhead to do, but it's very tight. Or is it going to be more loose, that you're just trying things out and you want to have more freedom without having to do the requirements of reporting and things like that, of that nature? And then you need to also decide how much is going to be automated and how much is going to be manual. There are a lot of tools out there now that help this effort tremendously. So it's probably going to be a combination of the two. Rationale, that's good. My slide didn't show up correctly. Okay, so now I'm going to talk more about software configuration management, which deals, as you can tell, with everything that goes into the development of software. So the problem that we are facing here is we have multiple people trying to work on the same software, and that software may be changing. You might have more than one version of the software that has to be supported. It's not only the ongoing development for the next release, but what have you released previously? So there's release systems. You might have other ones that have different functionality, or you might have different clients that have different versions of the same product that you need to maintain. And you have systems under development. And you may also have different versions that are for different operating systems. So CM really addresses the need for all this coordination and helps you manage what that is. So it manages the evolving software systems and hopefully controls the costs involved in making changes to your systems. Oh, sorry, there's little technical difficulties here. I didn't realize it was going to start going through here. Configuration management, a couple of definitions that would be useful. So software configuration management is the set of disciplines, management disciplines, to help you develop a product baseline. So it covers everything from initiating through controlling the changes to the software products, both during as well as after you've released that product, throughout its whole life cycle. Okay, so how's this done? So it's also considered, the configuration management is not just a separate entity that's outside your project, it's actually part of your project. And right now we have various people who are working on different parts of the configuration management, mostly in the development team, but we'll talk about that more in a little bit. So it can be done so we talked about before, at different levels of the company, organization, project specific, amongst the different project members. So you can have a subset for your own development team of a larger development effort, or a mixture of all of the above. So some of the activities that are involved with configuration management, a key process in here, activity, is to determine which configuration items you want to manage. You also have promotion management, and these deal more with software releases and movement of code from a developer machine to a testing environment to a production system. So promotion management, release management, branch management. I'm not sure if I should get too much into what each one of these are within the software development world, but we can address that later if people have questions. Then variant management, and then lastly, change management, which is a big part of this as well. And these activities can be done at the same time, or they don't have to be in serial fashion. Okay, the key activities: configuration item identification. So this is modeling the system as a set of evolving components. So it's kind of an ongoing activity. You have promotion management. So it's creation of versions for other developers. Release management. So it's releases for the clients and the users. Change management. Very, very important to the handling, approval, and tracking of change requests. Branch management, concurrent development support. And variant management, the management of coexisting versions. Okay, some of the roles that are involved with configuration management on your team. Configuration manager. He's responsible for identifying the configuration items at a high level. You may have a group of people who are doing this activity. He's also responsible for planning or defining the procedures for creating the promotions and releases. Again, this doesn't have to be one person. It could be a couple of people who are doing this, or a team. Change control board. Well, I haven't defined this. This is the board that's responsible for approving or rejecting changes to the software. Developers. They're the ones who are writing the code, and their responsibilities lie in whether their code is ready to be tested and put into a release. The auditor, and they're responsible for verifying that what is planned to be in a release or in a certain configuration is actually there. So just verifying that what we say is in there is actually there. So configure, some key terms, we've talked about a couple of these things, but we'll go into a bit more depth here. So configuration item. So this, by definition, an aggregation of hardware, software, or both, designated for configuration management, and is treated as a single entity in the configuration management process. So a lot of times you'll think of a piece of software code or a release, which would be the combination of a whole lot of people's work, including requirements documents, design documents, things like that. So, and there's also other aspects of your projects such that also go into areas of the operating system or the underlying infrastructure to support your application, and those would be go into how is the machine configured, what are the requirements there for successful operation of your software, and you could probably see a lot of those in release notes, things like that. Given that your application and your whole release process has a tremendous number of things out there that are being worked on, you may not want to have everything in your repository. You may want to have a lot, you may want to have a little, depending on the type of control you want to have over your project. So you need to figure out what you want to have under configuration control, and then when you want to start placing it under configuration control. So there could be part of your, you may decide that you don't care to have your development and your testing tiers underneath configuration management. So it's just kind of the wild, wild west down there. But at the QA level, which is the pre-release level, and then the release, you want to have it tightly done. So when do you want to start doing that? So, and then to the effect is also talks about We also talk about whether you start right at the beginning of the project or whether you want to start implementing it at a certain point in your project. If you're doing prototyping, things like that, you may want to delay, or you're doing a proof of concept that will then get put into as the start of a true development effort for a release software that you may want to start then. Since I grabbed some of this information from another presentation that I saw, they were really dealing with object-oriented programming, and so they used this analogy in order to say it's really hard to figure out what it is, or you just need some practice doing it. And I think that's really, it's a trial and error. You might find that you have a certain minimum that you would like to do, but then you start implementing too much, and then it becomes difficult to manage. So it's really a matter of trying to have some experience in what you're doing. So here are some examples of what you might consider for your configuration items. So a lot of different pieces of what go into a software product. Certainly not everything, but a lot of things. And in this example, a number of the ones with the arrows are considered to be under configuration management. Certainly your design document's very important. You don't want to change your design without making sure that that's communicated to everybody, and its requirements and everything are follow along with that. Requirements, you obviously don't want to change those without having an agreement, because that affects the scope of what the work that you are doing. So source code, test data. You may say, well, why is test data there and not test plan? The test data you would want to have under configuration management, because you want to have the same information going in being used, the same methods being the same data to test limits of your calculations and things like that. If that's a requirement, that you would have those consistent from release to release, so you wouldn't be testing with data that might all pass in one case and it would all fail in another. So you want to make sure your data is consistent. So some terminology for software configuration management. Version. So it's the initial release or re-release of a configuration item, so a piece of code with a complete compilation or recompilation of the item. So different versions will have different functionality. So you could think of an upgrade might have better capabilities, whatever better is defined as. That would be a different version. A revision is a change to the version that's been created, and it's for purposes of correcting errors. So the first code you put out there in your version had a flaw in it, and it was corrected in the revision. And then the definition of release is the formal distribution of an approved version. Baseline. Everybody talks about baselines in software development. So a baseline is a specification of a product that has been formally reviewed and agreed to by responsible management that thereafter serves as the basis for further development and can be changed only through formal change control procedures. And there are various types of baselines that you might have. So in these examples here, they just show different ones where different parts of your system, your application, might be completed in that baseline. So this typically, when you're developing software, you have a number of different baselines. You have your development baseline, which could be all your code that's put out there to be integrated into your test environment, for example. Your QA baseline, and then you have your product baseline. So I know that in some of our products, DRS, for example, we have our product baseline is actually it's a release for the client to be able to go in and test and feel the application, but it's not truly in production at that point. This slide covers how does code, or what are the steps between each of your releases, your baselines. So you have your baseline development. Sorry, this is taking a while to. All right. So it's really, this is trying to attempt to describe how your transition between your different baselines. In this case, if you're doing a product that's starting off in development, going through your QA, and then finally to your release. So you have different pushes of software, which are the arrows that are going from one release to the next. And at the bottom, very important, how do we manage the changes in the baselines? And that's your change management process. So, change management. And I think that's really kind of the crux of a lot of the CM, or the whole point, is to manage what changes you may want to make in an application. And that goes throughout the whole thing. So the whole process of your development, to really manage what is happening. So change management is the handling of requests that come in. And they could be a request from your client, or it could be from the public, could be a certain user. So the general process for handling a change should be very rigorous and systematic. So you make a change request, and typically when you're doing this, and we'll talk about this a bit more later on too, is that you'll have a form that needs to be completed, or a certain process that the application has to go through, or that the request has to go through. So the change request is compared against the requirements and the project constraints. And then based upon the analysis, then the board will decide whether they accept the change or reject it. And if it's accepted, you have to assign it to a developer, and then when it's finally done, with any piece of software, it needs to be examined against the requirements and tested. Controlling change. So in the development world, there are a couple of aspects of controlling change. Promotion is the internal development state of a software is changed. So in this one, it goes from programmer machine to in this case, the master directory. It would be pulled out into the development, the baseline. In the release, we go into your software repository where it would be locked down. This next slide just is an attempt to describe the different levels that you might have within your development organization, and in different environments you might be supporting. So the top one is just a programmer. Whatever they have, they can do whatever they want with. So it's really their own workspace that they can play around with and be working in. And then a controlled library would be one, most likely under configuration management, that actually has the latest, the tested, the approved pieces of code that are going to a QA environment before they would be released. And the software repository would have then the code that's in a release, all the packages, everything that that goes into a release, the software, the configurations, the requirements, user documentations would all be in that static library. Static meaning kind of read only if you're thinking in that terms. Again, that's the same kind of idea, just in a different, in a graphic format. Another important aspect of configuration management is your change policy. So the purpose of your policy is to guarantee that each release conforms to the common or the accepted criteria. So, and this is at various levels. It could be at all levels within your CM plan. So, a couple of examples for your consideration. No developer is allowed to promote source code which cannot be compiled without errors and warnings, or no baseline can be released without having been beta tested by 500 users. Things of that nature. So that's really down to your plan and how you want to set up your policy. So I should say here also that this would be more down at a project level, and we do have general policies for configuration management at the corporate level, but they need to be tailored for each specific development project. So configuration control, that's defined as with the following steps: how to identify the need for change. What is, for example, what is included in your change request form? Followed by what is the analysis and evaluation criteria for a change request? And then the approval or disapproval of the request. And then the verification and implementation and release of a change. The change request itself. So the process specifies the procedures for requesting a change to be made to a baseline configuration item and the information to be documented. And it has some common information: who's making the request, and the name of the software, the version of the software, the date, if it's a priority or what the priority level is, the reason for the change, as well as a detailed description. And these are tailored to your to whatever project you're working on and to what the requirements in that are. This is just a generic request. And we have different versions of these documents. We've actually done them based upon the type of request that's come in, at least in the past. And that might vary what information is required. Change evaluation specifies what the basis upon which your decision to approve the change or not are based. And part of that is seeing what the scope of the change is on your application. So it just deals with how you're going to make your decisions on whether to approve or deny a change request. So the approval or denial process, typically in a software development or in an environment where configuration control is very important, you will have a change control board. And any changes that you might want to make to a system have to go be presented with the proper documentation to the board, and then they will decide whether to approve or deny that change. You could have a different new piece of hardware you want to put into your system, your network, and that has to be justified in front of a change control board. I know our clients have them at various levels. Typically within a project, you would have a number of at the coding type level and the release management, you would have a number of people who would be involved in making those decisions whether to include something or not. So as part of your policy, you would be also indicating what they can and cannot approve. So implementing change in configuration management. This process specifies the activities for verifying and implementing an approved change. So it's really just the next step. You have an approved change, what happens to it? So in our example here, the information that must be contained, the original request, the names and versions of all the affected configuration items. So it could be requirements all the way down through each piece of code, kind of the traceability from the top, from the requirement all the way down, or the traceability of the change and all the pieces that affects underneath it, as well as other information. Implementing the change also has activities for completing the change process itself, for archiving, planning the controlling of releases, how to coordinate multiple changes, how to add new configuration items to the configuration, and how to deliver a new baseline. Status accounting. And this gets down toward verifying what you have under your configuration management plan is actually what it is, what it says it is. So what elements are to be tracked for the baseline changes? It addresses what types of status accounts are going to be generated, how often you want to go in and do your accounting for it, how is the information collected, stored, and reported, how is access to the configuration status data actually controlled, who gets to see it. Next, auditing. So the audits determine that for each configuration item that you have identified, that it has the required functional and physical characteristics. And it's a review of management tool. It's a way for you to evaluate your baseline. We do have a number of resources that we've been working on our CMMI processes, and part of our CMMI work is that we do have configuration management policies and procedures, which are available through this through the links on this page on the presentation. And I've also included a link to one of our draft plans for the DRS project for DevOps and how that is maintained. And that's interesting read to see what the various pieces are and the processes that are used to control the actual identifying which code goes into a release, and from there up into the QA environment and beyond. Those are interesting reads. I also have a couple of standards here if you are more interested in what the guides are. I can also provide another series of slides which deal with software configuration management planning and what is required in each of the different areas. And that's all I have for today. Again, in conclusion, that the configuration management is very important in many areas, particularly in software development, to make sure that that you can reproduce your software, you can redeploy any software release, you can make your processes repeatable, as well as managing how you make changes to your software. Thank you. Do we have questions?
All right. So far, John, I have only comments. There wasn't any questions.
Okay.
So let's give them a second and see what comes out. That was a good job. That was very in-depth. We've been dealing with change management issues on several of our projects for some time, and you know, I don't think it's as common an understood process as we like to think it is as a corporation. So, all right.
It should be quite rigorous.
Yeah, and clearly not. I've got no questions or comments from the peanut gallery, so we're going to go ahead and close it out. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time. And this presentation will be live on the NDI Presents YouTube channel, which can be found at netdes.com/NDI training. And it should be up within an hour or so. You're welcome to post any questions on the comments area below that. And we'll get those questions over to John so that he can answer them and post your answers right to the
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, everybody, for joining. Thank you, John, for your presentation. And we'll see you guys next week.